Good morning, good evening, pardon. Welcome to the It's Algorithmic blog tour. I'm Dr. Kiritsis and this is blog number 29. Now today we're going to be talking about a specific cult of Gnostics that call themselves Ophites, and we'll also be looking at the cult of the Serpent. The theologians and church fathers who laid the foundations of the orthodox stream of Christianity at the councils of Nicaea and Chalcedon in 325 and 451 of the Common Era identified the Gnostic religion as a single heretical current that had been sparked by the magician Simon Magus in the second half of the first century of the Common Era, and kept alive by a succession of teachers that included Jewish Gnostic Valentinus. Whilst it appears that these religious communities were quite variegated in nature and coexisted amicably beside other religious and philosophical ideologies of the time, irrespective of cultural or geographical frontiers, the patriarchs of the Catholic Church rarely, if ever, departed from its established convention of differentiating the adherents of the Gnostic phenomenon as followers of the Gnosis, falsely so called. In light of this, it comes as an unprecedented surprise, and a pleasant one at that, to run into a 3rd century treatise by the name of Adversus Omnis Heresis, whose author goes as far as to identify a sect of Christian Gnostics called Ophites. The first thing that stands out here is the etymology of the name in question. Ophite, or Ophite, derives from the Greek Ophis, which means snake. Logically then, advocates of this particular Gnostic sect probably placed a fervent emphasis on the serpent in the Garden of Eden as the conferrer of salvific knowledge. Or Gnosis, we might say. Yeah. At this point, it might be worth remembering some of the finer details of the occurrence in the Garden of Eden, as relayed by the Gnostic mythological treatise on the origin of the world, which we looked at in the last blog. In a fatalistic succession of biblical events that were remolded, reversed, and transposed to a level of psychological and spiritual truth that not only included but elevated the aesthetically feminine to salvific agent of the divine, Pistis Zoe, the instructor of life, entered the Garden of Eden in an attempt to foil her son's malevolent scheme. After blowing divine soul sparks into Eve of Zoe and extending the redemptive gesture indirectly to include Eve's male counterpart in Adam, she infused her essence into the tree of Gnosis. From here, she hindered her son's relentless insurrection against the transcendental beings in the Pleroma by instructing her mortal children, also her father's favoured creatures, to eat of the tree's fruit, an act which laid bare the path to salvation. The serpent, then, wasn't the entity vilified for instigating the fall from paradise and humanity's acquisition of ancestral sin. Quite the reverse, in fact. She was the audacious and urgent heroine whom conspired against the elder Boweth and his evil archons in a way that enabled Adam and Eve to outwit their much more formidable foes through mere intuition. This Gnostic reshuffling of biblical scripture gives us a taste of the narrative inversion for which the Gnostics are so renowned. In this light, Eve's temptation of Adam wasn't an act of damnation, but one of redemption made possible through instruction of the divine feminine in Pistis Zoe. Hence, the Ophites, if they existed at all, weren't only serpent worshippers, they were worshippers of the divine feminine. The idea of a Gnostic sect whose male and female worshippers vociferously expressed the passions of the great Mother Goddess, while concurrently resisting the rapid demytholization process instigated by the patriarchal attitudes of the Iron Age, incites a quixotic notion of awe and wonder in those of us who encompass an admiration and regard for all things aesthetically feminine in this life. But did such a sect ever exist? Epiphanius of Salamis, who lived between 310 to 403 CE, a bishop famed for his staunch and unwavering defense of the orthodox stream of Christianity, posited that the Ophites engaged the serpent in their celebration of the Eucharist. Now, during the course of the ritual, the snake jettisoned its usual protective inhibitions and mingled with the Ophians in a complacent manner, slithering over loaves of bread anointed with holy water and allowing those present to manhandle and kiss it on the mouth. This bit of detail is uncanny, to say the least, for it spurs to mind the feast of the Dormition of the Theotokos, which Theotokos in Greek means God-bearer, in the Greek Orthodox tradition. On this particular day, the church Our Lady of Languvarda on the island, on the Ionian island of Kefalonia, celebrates an impressive festival marked by the appearance of cat snakes, the genus, I believe, Telescopus phalanx, about the church's courtyard, walls and bell tower. The serpents, allegedly marked by a dotted imprint on their foreheads, resembling a cross, emerge through crevices hewn out for the bell ropes of the tower and slither their way over people, cultic paraphernalia, and a silver icon of the Virgin Mary itself. Partakers in the pastoral event claim that these snakes are timid and assiduously evasive by nature, yet during the course of the liturgy they become uncharacteristically tame and unperturbed at being handled by people. Strange to say the least. Could a natural phenomenon of this sort have inspired analogous mythological lore that was mistakenly implicated as a ritualistic aspect of the Gnostic feast of the Eucharist by the Church Fathers? Another possibility that comes to the foreground is that the Ophites were from Kefalonia, though this is an inference least likely to be true. There is no proof to suggest that either Epiphanius of Salamis or any of the other Christian writers who mention the Ophites in their writings ever visited Kefalonia. Perhaps the mode of transmission was secondary. Preachers and teachers of religious philosophy were usually globetrotters, nomadic at heart, and so it would not be unreasonable to assume that one of them had heard about the divinely inspired phenomenon from an indigenous Kefalonian. Lamentably, the absence of sufficient evidence can only ever amount to educated guesses that are tentatively speculative and two-dimensional at best. In either case, the ritualistic display that can be witnessed annually at the church Our Lady of Languvarda on the 15th of August or thereabouts is not in any way connected to any modern-day Hellenistic cult of the Virgin Mary. Hence, Epiphanius's statement may be nothing more than a detailed observation of the snake's role in Gnostic ritual, if that. Alternatively, if there ever was a cult whose adherents called themselves Ophites or Ophians, it's a highly improbable notion that any of the Church Fathers would have known who they actually were. For the vast majority of its life cycle, Gnosticism, and I'm still rather hesitant to use this word because it is a scholastic invention that wasn't coined until the 17th century, was an esoteric and spiritual movement that was at eternal odds with the self-proclaimed Orthodox sect of Christianity that was to become the Catholic Church, as well as with Judaism, a religious ideology whose patriarchal, bigoted, and chauvinistic overtones was despised more than the ego-gratifying and hence degenerate paganism of Greece and Rome. From this perspective, it becomes clearer why the rituals comprising the annual religious calendar of the Gnostics wouldn't have been noted by any learned writer collating a list of pastoral events in late antiquity. The rituals themselves were conducted privately, away from the prying eyes of the uninitiated masses. Furthermore, Gnostic mythological lore and ritual encompassed a strong Neo-Pythagorean bias, an emphatic yet authentic regard for all Pythagorean teachings. Whilst of a highly mystical nature, this instruction was imparted to chosen initiates under the radar of sworn secrecy. When Pythagoras settled in Crotona and established what was to become Europe's first esoteric school, he took heed from the mysterious Egyptian and Mesopotamian cults that he himself was initiated into during his travels, and imposed obligatory oaths of silence upon his own pupils. It is alleged that he is the first European man to ever do so. The Ophites or Ophians themselves would have been cut from exactly the same fabric.